All right, welcome back to the channel. I hope you've all had a really good holiday season so far. So, real quick here, the reason I decided to make this video is because I wanted to share with you a quick overview of Linux, and really more specifically PopOS as it currently is. Here we are at the end of 2023 and going into 2024. I made a video last year or the year before last on installing PopOS, and I covered quite a bit about System 76, the company who actually makes and maintains the operating system, or the distribution rather. So what I want to do is show you what Linux can do as your main operating system. This is not meant to be a comparison of Linux to Windows. That in itself would be its own video. Really, this is for those of you who have been thinking about switching to Linux, or maybe you're already a Linux user and you're considering trying out Pop. I also don't want to get into a comparison of different distributions, as that would be its own video as well. But I do want to mention that PopOS is Debian-based operating system and is currently running on kernel 6.2.6, and its current release is 22.04. Alright, anyway, so I've decided to break this video down into chapters, each chapter discussing a different feature of Linux and showing you some of the different applications that a lot of you may be using on a daily basis or on a regular basis. And I want to show you that they work just fine. A little caveat here, one thing I do want to mention is that actually pretty much all of the applications I'm going to show you required no tweaking and no configuration as far as Linux itself, as far as PopOS itself, I should say. Of course, some of the programs and applications required you to go in and do your own configuration for that particular product, but only one of them required any type of configuration or modification, and we'll discuss that in more detail when we get to that section. And finally, before we get started, another reason I wanted to make this video is because I've heard so much disinformation floating around out there about Linux and what it supposedly can't do. I suspect a lot of that is coming from people who, well, quite frankly, and not to be rude, really don't know what they're talking about. I'm sure you all know someone like a family member, a friend, an acquaintance, a coworker, a classmate, someone who tells you to avoid Linux at all costs because their sister's boyfriends, cousins, high school track coach's fiance tried Linux 15 or 20 years ago and had a horrible experience, so you need to avoid it. Or maybe you have that friend or that acquaintance who tried Linux a couple of years ago and went back to Windows because they claim it was a terrible experience. But more than likely what they didn't tell you was that the installation went fine and the operating system was working great up until they just started to screw around with settings and configurations, or CH modding into directories they had no business messing with because, again, they don't know what they're doing, ended up bricking the system and then, of course, blaming Linux. So I hope this video will help to dispel some of that disinformation and show you how far Linux has come. And with that said, let's get into it. Okay, let's take a look at Chapter 1. We are doing a quick tour of the desktop environment, and we're running GNOME 42.9. Let me double check that. I believe it's 42.9, and it is. So GNOME is a desktop environment that comes pre-installed with PopOS. There are multiple different desktop environments out there that you can choose from. So if you're someone who likes simplicity and ease of use, GNOME is fabulous. I think it is anyway. If you're someone who likes to customize and personalize and tweak and tinker, then I would recommend trying KDE. But there's also Cinnamon, there's also Mint, there's just a whole slew of different desktop environments that you can pick from. All right, so up in the top left-hand corner, we've got two shortcuts for workspaces and applications, and both of those shortcuts are also found down below in the taskbar. So we have Show Workspaces and we have Show Applications. So let's take a quick look at these. Workspaces allows you to have multiple windows hosting different activities. So maybe you're working on a school project or a work project on one. You can open up a second one to do some shopping, check social media, play a game, whatever the case may be. And you can have as many of these as you like. Extremely handy, again, especially if you're someone who does not have multiple monitors. Next to that, we have the Applications tray, shortcut to the Applications tray, I should say. And this will show you all the apps that you have installed or that have come pre-installed with your PopOS setup. One thing I really like about GNOME is that we can create folders to really organize our apps according to what their function is, what their purpose are, or really for any reason that you want. And you can see I've got one for 3D printing, one for content creation, one for development, gaming, office work, and then of course our system tools. Very handy. And again, you can also access this down here at the bottom on your taskbar. Same function, just two different locations. Okay, so at the top center of our screen, we have our notification center, our clock, and our calendar. And with the calendar, you can set reminders, of course, check your weather, and notifications will come through here in the form of alerts. So if you have your alerts set for YouTube videos, Reddit posts, whatever it is that you want, those alerts will come through and be displayed up here underneath the top bar momentarily. And you can of course turn this off by simply turning on Do Not Disturb, which I have turned on now because I'm shooting this video. Okay, so in the top right hand corner, we have a shortcut option for various settings. You can check your wired connection, your Wi-Fi connection, Bluetooth, access your settings, and of course you have your power options here to restart, suspend, which is basically sleep mode, completely shut your power down or log out and then log back in as a different user, whatever the case may be. Okay, as I mentioned before, GNOME is not as customizable as KDE, but there are several things you can do, and maybe that'll be another video down the road. But I wanted to show you quickly, when you right click on the center, anywhere on your desktop, you can change your background, you can access your display settings, open up a terminal, just a variety of different options here. And for you Windows users, this should look fairly familiar to you. You want to create a folder, you can. Let's call it test. And enter. We have a new folder now on our desktop. I typically don't keep folders on my desktop. It's just a personal preference. So let's change the background. Come in here to change background and pick Tigrix. And simple as that. Okay, so finally we have our taskbar down below. We have a launcher that we can access our apps quickly. This also shows you what apps are currently open or running. So let's say we want to start DaVinci Resolve. And we can just click on it, open it up. And I have a cat that's trying to get my attention right now, so give me one moment here to set him aside. All right. So we don't want to keep DaVinci open. We're going to close it. But again, you can access all of your applications through this quick launcher, and you can check and see what you have running currently and or currently open. We've already covered the show workspaces and the show applications. For the file system, most of you should recognize this. If you're a Windows user, you have home, desktop, documents, downloads, music, pictures, videos, of course your trash can. Pretty self-explanatory, and you can manipulate this as you see fit. You can create folders, you can move stuff around, copying and paste. Very straightforward. And of course we have Steam, we have our terminal, and the terminal will be several videos in and of itself, because it's a way that you can manipulate your system by typing in commands rather than pointing, clicking, and dragging and dropping. But again, it's a lot more complicated, a lot more detailed than that. That's a pretty rudimentary kind of explanation of it, but we'll get into that in more detail in a future video. And then finally, we have the Pop Shop. Well, shouldn't say finally because we still have settings to look at yet, but we have the Pop Shop, which is very handy as well. And in the Pop Shop, we have access to several different categories of applications: audio, communication, games, graphics, development, whatever you want. And again, as I mentioned in a previous video, for every Windows application out there, there is typically going to be a Linux equivalent. Now, I will say that a lot of times, unfortunately, the Linux equivalent is not as robust and is not as functional as some of the pay-for Windows applications, but they are functional and they do get the job done. And another thing about the Pop Shop is you can come up to these three lines at the very top right-hand corner and go to Updates and Installed Software. And anything that's any of your applications that are needing an update, it'll tell you over here on the right-hand side, it'll say update. You can click on that and it'll update, do its thing, and that's it. You're done. Okay, so finally we have our settings. So our settings is not much different than what you would expect to find in Windows. Access to a lot of your features and functions: Wi-Fi, network, Bluetooth, power, displays. Going to our displays here, you can see I have two displays, and LG 32-inch and an Encore Communications 24-inch. So again, should be very familiar to a lot of you out there who use Windows or to access your settings quite a bit. Pretty straightforward, and that should wrap it up for chapter 1. So let's move on to chapter 2. All right, so chapter 2, we're going to take a quick look at content creation. I'm going to cover a few of the apps that I use to make videos and other types of content. Some of you may be very familiar with these types of apps because you use them yourself or you've played around with them in the past. So let's take a quick look, go into our content creation folder, and I've got DaVinci Resolve, GIMP, Kdenlive, and OBS Studio. Now, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on showing you how these things work and what we can and can't do with them. That's not the point of this video. If you recall back in the intro, I said I just wanted to show you that these work with very little to no tweaking or configuration in your OS. So let's start with DaVinci Resolve first. So I'm just going to fire it up. Now, I don't use DaVinci Resolve a lot. I'm still learning it. I'm actually primarily using Kdenlive for most of my editing. But you can see we opened it up here. We can create a project if we want. Everything works fine. So there was a caveat I did want to bring up, and that is if you're running an AMD card, I'm running the RX 6600 XT, and I was getting an error, which I'll show here on the screen, and some of you may have encountered this in the past, and it took forever for me to figure out what was going on, why wouldn't this work, and come to find out I was just simply missing the OpenCL framework. So to fix this problem, if you are running an AMD card, all you have to do is open your terminal and type in this command, sudo app install mesa-opencl-icd, hit enter, put in your password, it installs, and open up DaVinci Resolve and it'll work fine. Now I'll put this down in the description of the video so you can copy and paste this if you need it, if you happen to be using an AMD card and running into that error. Close the terminal out and let's move on to the next one. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at GIMP. GIMP is a pretty robust photo editor, content creation tool, platform I should say, and it's not quite as good as Photoshop, but it's free, it's powerful, and it will do what you need it to do, what you want it to do, unless you're a high-end professional type of graphic designer and you need a lot more of the tools that Photoshop would have. But again, Photoshop costs $22 a month and GIMP doesn't. But to show you real quick, let's just open up a wallpaper. Let's grab Kratos. So open up Kratos here. You know, there's all the tools up here that you have at your disposal. You have your rectangle, selection rectangle, your free select tool, your fuzzy select tool. You've got your color picker, so we can grab this color here, and let's just mess with Kratos a little bit. So, you know, very powerful, very robust tool, and again, it is free. So let's move on to the next. Oh, and I'm sorry, and let me back up for a second here. To install GIMP and to install DaVinci Resolve, you simply just go to your Pop Shop, and at the top you can just type in GIMP, and you'll see it's one of your options to select, so you can click on it and then hit. Now you can also choose the DEB or the flat pack. The flat pack works really well. They both work actually. I haven't had any problems with either. Then you just hit install and you're good to go. And you can do the same for most of the programs that we use on a regular basis. Some of them is a little bit more, I don't want to say complex, but it's a few extra steps to get it installed. DaVinci Resolve, you have to go to the website, Blackmagic, and then download the app image from them. All right, so let's move on to Kdenlive, which I'm currently using now. You can see I'm in the process of editing this video as I go along. So it's a very powerful tool, not quite as powerful as DaVinci Resolve, but it gets the job done and it's free. Not much really to say on it. It does work. It works really well. And Kdenlive, whoops, I don't want to close this. And Kdenlive, again, you can get from the Pop Shop, or you can install for your terminal. And by the way, for your terminal users, you would simply just install sudo app install GIMP. Type in your password if you want to install GIMP. And I already have it installed, so it didn't install a second time. But I actually think this is quicker than using the Pop Shop. So that's why I hope that folks who do come to Linux take the time to learn how to use the terminal, because it is so much faster, in my opinion. Doing a multitude of different tasks. Okay, and then finally we've got OBS Studio, which I have up and running right now. It works fine right out of the box, and I believe it's in the Pop Shop as well. Let's check real quick. See OBS. I could type. And it is. So you just go to your Pop Shop, type in OBS Studio or OBS, and then hit install, and you're up and going. So this is pretty easy to use. I'm sure a lot of you use OBS, or you're considering making content in the future. It's a free option, of course, and it works great with Linux and PopOS in particular. I also want to mention that you can stream as well. You just need your Twitch stream key. So if you're into streaming or you want to get into streaming, just know that OBS and Linux works great. All right, so with that said, let's get into chapter 3. All right, so chapter 3, we're going to take a look at 3D printing. To start off with, I have an Ender 3. I bought it a few years ago. It works great. Done all kinds of prints, busts in the past, stands for my handheld devices, just pretty much anything I want and need, I can 3D print with that particular model. That's not the Ender 3 Pro, it's just the Ender 3. They were 130, 140 bucks. I think they've come down in price since I bought mine. But anyway, as far as software utilities go, for Linux, for PopOS, I use Blender. It opened up on my second screen, which is fine. Let's drag it over here. And you can see it opened up just fine. It installs fine. I'm not really an adept user with Blender. I use it for modifications on small projects. So if there's anybody watching this video who's a more advanced user who uses this software on Linux, if you could leave a comment below if there's any issues with some of the more advanced settings, more advanced features, please let me know. Otherwise, let's move on to Cura, which is a 3D slicer, and this will convert your files into G-code that the 3D printer can read. And in fact, I'm going to take you through one real quick here to start a print, something I've been meaning to print anyway, so this is a good opportunity to kind of show it to you in action. All right, so the first thing we need to do is grab an STL file, and the slicer will convert that STL file into a G-code that we can use to print our object. So let's go to Thingiverse, and let's type in iPhone stand. All right, so let's give credit where credit is due. Alessandro9 is the creator of this file, so shout out to him. And let's go ahead and download the STL file. Take about 3 or 4 seconds. And that is finished, and I've already downloaded it a couple times here, just experimenting before making the video. So let's close this out and minimize. And now let's go to our downloads. We're going to unzip this right into the downloads folder, so let's extract it. Downloads is fine. Close, and we're good to go. So now we have our file here. We have 2 STLs. So I'm just going to grab the first one. So we'll come back into Cura. We'll go to File, Open Files, iPhone 5 stand, open it up, and there's our 3D print. Or there's our 3D rendering of what our print is going to look like when it's finished. So let's go ahead and check the infill. I like about 20%. We have that cubic. The speed's fine. I'm using PLA filament, so 200 degrees Celsius is fine. Build plate temperature, 50 degrees Celsius is fine. And fan speed 100%. I like using Raft. I feel like I get better quality print using Raft. My bed isn't the most level, but I've had some problems in the past with getting some striations in my prints. When I started using Raft, that all went away. I know it's using up a lot more PLA than I probably should be using, but you know, PLA is pretty inexpensive. Let's go ahead and slice this. And we're going to save to disk. We'll save it in our downloads. All right, so we're finished with Cura. So let's go ahead and close this out. And let's go back into our Octoprint. So we're going to upload this file. Now we have the G code, which is what the 3D printer needs to read. And let's go ahead and hit the print button. All right, so now our temperatures. So the bed's going to warm up first, and then the extruder will warm up. And going to control, you can see I have a camera set up on my printer so I can check the progress throughout the day. So I'm going to go ahead and get to starting the print. I'm not going to, the print will take probably an hour, maybe 2 hours. So obviously we're not going to sit here for 2 hours and let it go. And again, this is not a tutorial on how to 3D print. I'm just showing you that this process works well with PopOS and with Linux. So, all right, so that should wrap up our 3D printing chapter. So let's move on to chapter 4. All right, so chapter 4, we're going to take a very brief and very quick look at OpenOffice, which is the Linux equivalent of Office 360. And we have Libra. There are comes with a package of 5 different applications. Probably the 3 most prevalent ones are going to be LibreOffice Calc, which is the equivalent of Excel, Impress, which is the equivalent of PowerPoint, and Libre Writer, which is the equivalent of Microsoft Word. We can open up Calc real quick, and you can see the layout is very familiar if you're an Excel user, Excel spreadsheet user. It has a very rich collection of different features and functions that you can use to get your work done. You can save it as a PDF. You can also save your files in a variety of different formats. So we have spreadsheet, we have Excel 2007, 360.xlsx, .xltx, .xls, so on and so forth. And this is free, of course, and I think the current subscription fee for Office 360 is about $6 a month, give or take. So for most of us out there, myself included, and probably most of you, OpenOffice will do exactly what you need. There may be somewhat of a learning curve if you're used to using OpenOffice, as some of the features and the layout are obviously much different, and some of the features may be a little bit harder to find. But you spend a little time with it, get used to it, and you'll find that it does exactly what you need it to do. So it's a fantastic alternative to Office 360. And again, you're not paying a subscription fee because this is free. Okay, with that said, let's go to chapter 5. Okay, so chapter 5 is going to be another short and sweet, quick walkthrough of some of the, if you're into development, game development, or just learning how to code, there's a ton of applications out there that you can use. So I currently have installed, where's my development folder? There it is. So I've got Unity installed right now. One of my bucket list goals is to author a game, probably a 2D platformer. That's pretty common, right? Anyway, so this was very easy to install. I went to the website and downloaded the app image, installed it, and it worked fine. So you can click on New Project. And of course, you've got 2D Core, 2D Model. Just a variety of different options here that you can start your project with. Anyway, so Unity works. I have not tried Unreal yet. I have read and I've seen some videos where it does work on Linux, does work really well. But I'm pretty sure EA owns it, so I'm not a big fan of that. But anyway, so let's go to Visual Studio Code. So if you're into learning a language, or if you're a developer of any type, you probably know more than I do about it already. But I am trying to learn Rust, working on learning Rust. So I did install the Rust extension, as you can see here. So not a lot to show here yet because it's something I'm just getting into. So I'm fairly new at it. So I'm not gonna pretend like I have a lot of knowledge on it because I don't, but I'll develop knowledge over time. All right, so that takes care of chapter 5. Let's move on to chapter 6. Okay, so some of you might be wondering why I've included a chapter on accessing social media and your favorite streaming services or various web pages, whatever the case may be. It's because part of the disinformation that I've heard is that people are telling other people that you can't watch Hulu, you can't watch Netflix, you can't watch Crunchyroll, you can't check your social media, your Facebook if you're 90, or if your Instagram, or whatever the case may be. And I'm just going to take a few seconds here and kind of show you that you actually can. So let's take a look. So here's my Hulu. And by the way, these require no installation of any apps. There's no apps to install. You just simply open up your browser, go to your social media site, go to your favorite streaming site, and log in. So, and Crunchyroll works fine. You can see I'm on season 1, episode 10 of Noragami. Just finished up Jujutsu Kaisen. Anyway, it works. So it's kind of ridiculous I have to mention this, but again, part of that disinformation needs to be addressed. So let's move on to chapter 7, which is our final chapter, and we're going to talk about gaming, which is probably what a majority of you want to hear about. All right, so for our final chapter, I did want to take a moment to talk about gaming, which is important to me and probably most of you as well. One of the biggest myths, lies, pieces of misinformation is that you can't game on Linux. Gaming on Linux just doesn't work, and that's just patently wrong. It does work. There are certain exceptions to that, and that is games, multiplayer games with anti-cheats typically are not going to work with Linux. And that's not because of Linux, that's because the developers of these anti-cheats have no interest in supporting the Linux platform. For example, I've been playing Rainbow Six Siege since the game's release, and I play primarily on my Xbox and on my PC because BattlEye does not work on Linux. Likewise, Call of Duty, again, I play mostly on my Xbox and my PC because, or my Windows partition, I should say, because Ricochet does not work with Linux. And there are other games out there as well that are not Linux friendly. If you're into Genshin Impact, for example, I'm not particularly a fan of waifu collection simulators, but if you are, hey, more power to you. But Genshin will work on Linux, but it does take a lot of work in the background to get it to work. And then there's always the chance that the software will detect you're on Linux and then ban your account. However, for the most part, gaming works perfectly fine. And I have tried the vast majority of these games at one point in time on Linux, and they all work fine. They all work perfectly fine. And in fact, I'll show you Neo 2 here in a moment. And if you remember at the very beginning of this video, I was playing Hogwarts Legacy. I was playing it on this computer, on my Linux partition, and no frame issues, no graphical glitches, no sound or music glitches. It ran perfectly fine. So what I did want to show you is that if you go to protondb.com and explore, Valve will tell you what games work and what games don't work, primarily on the Steam Deck, but the Steam Deck runs on SteamOS, which is a version of Linux. I think it's based off of Arch Linux, actually. But if it works on your Steam Deck, it's going to work perfectly fine on PopOS as well. So you can see we have Grand Theft Auto 5, Ark, Team Fortress 2, Fallout 4, Civ 6, Arma 3, Dying Light, Gary's Mod, Elden Ring. These are just a few examples of the couple of thousand games now, I think, that work fine on Linux. Red Dead 2, The Division, Halo, Master Chief Collection, Counter-Strike, 7 Days to Die. So the list goes on and on and on of all the games that work perfectly fine. But real quick, let's just show you. Well, actually, you know what? Before I open the game up, let me show you. If you install a game on Steam and you're having some glitches or some issues, all you have to do is come over to this gear to manage, go down to properties, go to compatibility, and then click on force the use of a specific Steam Play compatibility tool. And then you can choose whichever version of Proton is most applicable, most compatible for your particular game. I typically just use Glorious Egg Roll or Proton GE, and I've had no problems at all. So that said, let's hop into Neo real quick and let me show you, and then we'll wrap this video up. So I did want to mention real quick while the game's loading in that I'm using my Xbox controller, my Xbox One controller. I've used my PlayStation controller, my 8-bit Dews. Pretty much any controller you have and you want to use will work fine. And I'm playing in windowed mode simply so I can capture the gameplay for you without having to change my source in OBS. Alright, so just want to get into the game real quick and show you some of the settings and show you that it actually works. Alright, so we're loading in. It's actually a fantastic game, by the way. I can't decide if I like this better than Sekiro or not, but they're both pretty phenomenal. Okay, so let's take a look at settings real quick. I think because I'm in windowed mode, I'm probably not going to be able to change my Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, so I'm in playing in 720p right now, only because I'm in windowed mode. But full screen mode, I can run pretty high resolution, even with my RX 6600 XT. Okay, anyway, so the video's gone on long enough. I just wanted to show you, kind of to prove my point, that you can game in Linux just fine. Again, there are certain games that aren't going to work, and those are primarily games with anti-cheats. And some other games may require a bit of configuration behind the scenes, but for the most part, you can game on Linux just fine. All right, so that's going to wrap up today's video. I hope I've made a point and shown you that using Linux and PopOS is a viable alternative to Windows. And I did want to mention one thing too, that the rumor mill has it that Windows may be going to a subscription-based service, Windows 12, which I'm not a fan of, and I'm sure you're not either. So there's precedent for this in that Microsoft has Office 360 as a subscription-based service for quite some time now, and they're making money hand over fist, so it's only logical that they would extend this service to cover Windows as well. So if you are considering coming to Linux, I hope this video has shown you that it's a viable option. It works. Most of the stuff that you do, that I do, you can do in Linux with just fine, with very minimal tweaking, very minimal configuration on your part. As you saw in the video, the only piece of software, the only application that I had to do any tweaking with was with DaVinci Resolve. And that was just one line of one command that I typed into my terminal, hit enter, put my password in, and DaVinci Resolve is up and going. So I hope the video helped. If it does, please leave a like and subscribe if you're interested in more content like this coming out. I do have another video coming up pretty soon where I'm swapping out the joysticks in my Steam Deck. And I do want to start a series of videos on teaching the basic commands of using the terminal, like sudo. For the longest time, I've always said sudo, but it's actually pronounced sudo, by the way. Super user do, get into that and some of the other commands, and then work our way up to more advanced commands and more advanced types of, how should I say, manipulation of your Linux install. So again, if you are interested in that, please subscribe. And if I made any mistakes, please let me know in the comments below. And I hope to see you in the next video.